All right, so ready to dive deep into something that's all about you.
Always.
Today, it's all about personality.
Oh, interesting.
And we'll be using the Big Five personality traits model, it's also known as the five-factor model, or OCEAN.
Ah, yes, a classic framework.
Yeah, and it's not about putting you in a box. It's more like, think of it as a personality GPS.
I like that. A GPS.
It helps you kind of navigate your strengths, your weaknesses,
Yeah.
maybe even some hidden potential you never even knew you had.
That's a great way to put it, because what's so powerful about this model, I think, is that it sees personality as a spectrum,
Right.
not just rigid categories.
Right.
It's not like you're an extrovert or an introvert.
Yeah.
You fall somewhere along a continuum for each of these 5 traits.
Okay, so let's unpack these 5 traits, shall we?
Let's do it.
First up, we have openness to experience.
Okay.
And this isn't just about, trying exotic foods on vacation. It's really more about how much you crave new knowledge, new perspectives, how comfortable you are with unfamiliar things, the unfamiliar.
Exactly. Like someone high in openness might be the person who's always suggesting, hey, let's watch this new documentary, or they go down a rabbit hole on Wikipedia.
Oh, yeah, totally.
While someone who might score a little lower, they might prefer sticking to their routines, things they know, those tried and true things.
Yeah, familiar things, I get that.
Yeah.
Okay, up next we have conscientiousness.
Right.
I feel like we all know that person who is like the meticulous planner, like color-coding their calendar, conquering their to-do list.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like high conscientiousness in action.
And the research is really fascinating here. There's a strong link between high conscientiousness and success in many areas of life.
Oh, interesting.
But then on the other hand, someone who might be a bit lower in this trait, they might thrive in environments that are more flexible, where they can improvise, adapt quickly.
Yeah, they like to go with the flow. Okay, so now let's talk about, I think, where it gets really interesting, extraversion.
Okay, yeah.
It's often kind of simplified to this party animal versus wallflower thing.
Right.
But I have a feeling it's way more nuanced than that.
It really is, because extroversion is more about where you draw your energy from.
Okay, yeah.
So extroverts, they tend to feel energized in social situations, lots of people around, whereas introverts often recharge, by spending time alone. It's not that one's better than the other, just different.
Gotcha. So it's not about being shy or outgoing, but more like, how do you recharge your batteries?
Exactly.
That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Okay, what about agreeableness? Now, this one, I feel like it's kind of self-explanatory,
Yeah.
but is there more to it?
Definitely. High agreeableness is all about valuing harmony, being compassionate, putting others' needs before their own sometimes.
Yeah.
These are the folks who are always willing to lend a hand. They'll mediate conflicts, build bridges between people.
So they're like the glue that holds society together, it sounds like.
In a way, yeah.
But could being too agreeable actually backfire?
That's a good point, because while being agreeable is generally a positive trait, it's important to remember that for highly agreeable individuals to assert their own needs.
Yeah.
Yeah, set healthy boundaries too, right?
So they don't get taken advantage of.
Exactly.
Makes sense. Okay, last but not least, we have neuroticism. This one, I think, sometimes gets a bit of a bad rap.
It does, yeah.
But it's really about how sensitive you are to stress and those negative emotions, right?
Exactly. It's not about being crazy or unstable. People high in neuroticism, they simply experience their emotions very intensely, positive and negative.
Okay.
They might be a little more prone to worry, anxiety, self-doubt, but they're often very insightful too, empathetic, deeply in tune with their feelings.
So while they might need to develop some coping mechanisms for those more intense emotions, they also bring a lot to the table.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay, so now I think what's interesting is that these 5 factors don't just exist in a vacuum. They all kind of interact with each other, right? They influence each other.
They do. They all contribute to the final, I guess, like a recipe, right?
Oh, I like that.
Each ingredient contributes to the final flavor. So, for example, someone who's high in neuroticism but also high in openness might be incredibly creative and imaginative.
Oh, okay.
But also prone to anxiety and a little self-criticism.
So understanding how these traits kind of play off of each other can help you understand why you might be really good at some things but struggle with others.
Exactly. It's like having a personalized owner's manual for your personality.
I love that. Okay, so just remember, personality isn't destiny.
Right.
These traits, while they tend to be pretty stable over time, they can evolve, they can change through experience and conscious effort.
Absolutely. You're not stuck. You have the power to shape your own personality journey.
So instead of just accepting it as a fixed thing, You can use this knowledge. You can leverage your strengths, manage those weaknesses, and really create a life that aligns with who you are.
That's the goal. And that's where tools and resources, like the ones from Personality NFT come in.
Yeah.
They offer personality tests, AI-powered analysis, and even a community to connect with.
Oh, nice.
All focused on personal growth.
Okay, so before we go any further, let's take each trait one by one and really kind of dive into the nitty-gritty.
Sounds good.
So starting with openness.
So openness, it's not just about, oh, I tried a new food. It's linked to intellectual curiosity, a willingness to challenge the usual way of thinking. Even political ideology has been connected to this.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, studies show people high in openness tend to be more liberal, open to diverse viewpoints.
While those who score a little lower might be more drawn to traditional values, find comfort in those structures and routines.
Exactly.
So it's not just about skydiving or eating snails, right? It's about how your mind approaches the world.
It is. It influences everything from the music you like to new movies, career choices, even how you solve a problem.
Wow.
Someone high in openness might thrive in like a fast-paced, constantly changing environment. Someone lower might prefer, stable and predictable.
Right. So again, not about one being better than the other,
Yeah.
just understanding where you fall on that spectrum.
Exactly. And, thinking about how that might impact your choices and your experiences.
Right.
For example, someone with high openness might be more likely to change careers a few times, always seeking those new challenges and opportunities to learn.
Makes sense. And someone who scores lower might find a lot of satisfaction in mastering one specific skill or building a really long career in one particular field.
Yeah, exactly. And it's fascinating, how this difference in perspective can lead to really interesting dynamics in workplaces, relationships, even families.
Now, where it gets really interesting is how openness interacts with the other traits. So, for example, openness and conscientiousness, how might those two work together in someone's life?
That's a great question. Someone who's high in openness, but let's say low in conscientiousness, they might have tons of creative ideas, but struggle to actually follow through on them.
Okay.
They might get distracted easily, jumping from project to project, have a little trouble with deadlines, maybe.
So the classic ideas person.
Exactly. All the ideas, but the execution is a bit tricky.
Yeah, we get that.
But on the flip side, someone who's high in both high openness and high conscientiousness, that can lead to incredible success.
How so?
Well, especially in things like entrepreneurial ventures, right? They've got the vision to think outside the box, but also the discipline to actually make those visions happen.
So it's like the perfect recipe for dreaming big and then having the work ethic to actually make it happen.
Yeah, that's it. And it's not just about entrepreneurship. You see this combination in a lot of fields where you need both that creativity and the strong work ethic. Think like scientific research, art, even social activism.
So like you said earlier, it's like having that cheat sheet for life, understanding your big 5 traits can really help you.
It's all about self-awareness.
You can identify those pitfalls, but also you can see where you might have that natural advantage.
Absolutely.
Okay, so moving on to the next trait in our ocean adventure.
All right.
Conscientiousness. We already talked about how it kind of relates to success.
Right.
But let's dive into the specific characteristics of behaviors. What does high conscientiousness look like? What does low conscientiousness look like?
Okay, so high conscientiousness, they're the organized ones, the disciplined ones, you know the type. Always on time, meet deadlines, always have a plan.
Probably even a backup plan for their backup plan.
Exactly. And this translates into real results. Studies have shown that people who score high here, they tend to excel academically, perform well in their jobs. They even have higher lifetime earnings.
So it's not just a personality quirk. It's actually a predictor of success.
It's correlated, for sure. But remember, and this is important, it's not the only path to success.
Oh, right, of course.
People who are lower in conscientiousness, they might struggle with those traditional measures of achievement, grades and things like that. But they often excel in environments that value flexibility, being adaptable, creative problem solving, those sorts of things.
Yeah, so they might not be like the star student or, the person climbing the corporate ladder, but maybe they're the ones who disrupt an industry,
Yeah, exactly.
Or they're the artists who create something groundbreaking.
Exactly. That ability to think outside the box, to embrace spontaneity, that can be a huge asset.
Okay, so let's talk about the potential downsides, though,
Okay, yeah.
of both high and low conscientiousness.
Right.
So What are some of the pitfalls someone might encounter at either end of that spectrum?
Well, for someone high in conscientiousness, the biggest challenge can be perfectionism. That drive to achieve, that attention to detail, sometimes leads to workaholism, anxiety, not being able to relax and enjoy the moment.
Oh, so they're so focused on checking things off the list they forget to actually live?
It can happen, yeah. And for those low in conscientiousness, the challenge there is procrastination, disorganization.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They might struggle to meet deadlines, keep track of appointments, follow through on commitments.
Which I imagine can lead to some frustration, missed opportunities.
Exactly. Strained relationships, for sure.
But there's got to be an upside, right?
There is. This is what's so interesting. Studies have shown that people low in conscientiousness, they can actually be more resilient to change.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're less likely to get flustered when things don't go according to plan, better at adapting to unexpected circumstances.
So while their lack of planning might, make them seem unreliable at times,
Right.
it can also be a real strength in a world that's, constantly changing.
Yeah, the world is unpredictable. So again, it's all about understanding those trade-offs, right? Finding ways to use your strengths, but also being aware of those weaknesses.
All right, let's shift gears. Let's talk about extroversion.
Okay.
This one's often misunderstood.
It is.
It's not as simple as just being, outgoing or social, right?
It's not. It really boils down to where you get your energy from.
Right. We talked about that earlier.
Someone high in extroversion, they're energized by social interaction. Someone low, they need solitude to recharge.
Exactly. And it's important to remember it's a spectrum. It's not a binary.
Right. Not black and white.
Not every extrovert is like a party animal.
Right.
And not every introvert is a hermit.
There are shades of gray, lots of variation within each category.
Totally. Like you might have an extrovert who loves to public speak, goes to all the big social events, but also needs some quiet time alone just to process, right?
Absolutely.
And then you might have an introvert who loves deep conversations with close friends, but feels totally drained by small talk or those big crowds.
Exactly. And also differentiating introversion from shyness.
Okay, yeah, explain that.
Shyness is about fear of judgment, social judgment. Introversion is about needing solitude to recharge.
So you could have like a shy extrovert,
Yeah.
someone who loves being around people but gets really nervous in the spotlight,
Totally, yeah.
and then like a confident introvert who enjoys being social but needs their alone time.
Exactly, which is something that I think pop culture often misses.
Yeah.
They portray introverts as awkward, antisocial.
Right.
It's like, oh, introversion, that's a problem that needs fixing.
Yeah, like that classic movie trope where the shy, nerdy character suddenly transforms into a social butterfly after a makeover.
Exactly. It's this myth that it's something to be overcome.
Right, when it's just a different way of being and, often a strength.
It can be, especially in today's world.
Oh, totally. This hyper-connected world where we're constantly bombarded with, information, stimulation, the ability to just disconnect, focus inward, recharge in solitude. That's gold.
It really is. And introverts often do very well in fields that require deep concentration, independent work, creative problem solving.
So like writers, artists, scientists.
Programmers.
Yeah, entrepreneurs.
All sorts.
So it's not about being antisocial. It's about finding your rhythm, thriving in the environments that work for you. So let's talk about how extroversion plays out in different parts of life, like leadership, for example.
Okay.
There's this assumption, I think, that extroverts make better leaders.
Right, because they're more charismatic, assertive.
Yeah, they're the ones who, command attention and inspire others with their energy.
Right. But research actually shows that introverts can be incredibly effective leaders, too.
Oh, really? That's interesting. What makes them successful?
Well, they tend to be great listeners. They build strong relationships. They really understand the needs of their team. They're also more thoughtful, more deliberate, I think, in their decision-making, which can lead to better outcomes in the long run.
So while extroverts are great at, rallying the troops, inspiring action, introverts might be better at strategizing.
Yeah.
Problem solving, creating that supportive work environment.
It's about finding the right balance.
Yeah, different styles for different contexts. What about relationships? Does extroversion play a role there?
It does. It seems obvious, right, that extroverts have more friends, a busier social life.
Right.
But does that mean they have deeper relationships?
So it's quality over quantity, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And introverts, while they might have fewer close friends, they often form very deep bonds.
Okay.
They're more likely to engage in those one-on-one conversations, those deeper connections.
So it's not about being popular. It's about finding those people who get you.
Exactly. Investing in those relationships.
Okay, makes sense. All right, let's move on to agreeableness. This is the often seen as the nice guy trait.
Yeah,
But there's got to be more to it than that.
there is. It's about valuing harmony, cooperation, and empathy. They're the ones who, always willing to lend a helping hand, mediate those conflicts, put others first, sometimes even to their own detriment.
So they're like the peacemakers, the team players, the ones who build that positive, supportive atmosphere.
Exactly. And it makes sense then that high agreeableness is linked to positive outcomes in relationships.
Oh, interesting.
More satisfying romantic relationships, stronger friendships, better social support overall.
So being a nice guy really does pay off.
Well, again, it's not about being nice just for the sake of it.
Right.
It's about genuinely caring, being willing to compromise,
Okay.
striving for fairness.
So genuine concern for others, not just putting on a happy face.
Exactly. And like all these traits, agreeableness is on a spectrum.
Yeah.
Someone low in agreeableness might not be a jerk.
Right.
They just might be more assertive, more direct, more focused on their own goals.
So less concerned with pleasing others, more willing to, speak your mind, even if it ruffles some feathers.
Exactly. Which can be an asset in certain situations.
Yeah, I can imagine.
For example, someone low in agreeableness might be a really good negotiator or a strong advocate for themselves or others.
So not about being mean or selfish, just different priorities, different approach to social interaction.
Right. And every personality has its strengths and weaknesses.
Now, what about the downsides of each end of the spectrum? For agreeableness, I mean.
So for someone high in agreeableness, the struggle can be setting boundaries, asserting their needs.
Yeah, I could see that.
They're so focused on pleasing others, avoiding conflict, they might end up sacrificing their own well-being.
The people pleasers.
Exactly. And that leads to problems in their personal life, their professional life.
For sure.
They might stay in a job they hate because they don't want to disappoint their boss, or agree to do favors for friends when they're already overwhelmed.
So it's admirable wanting to help, but got to prioritize their own needs too.
Absolutely. And learning to say no.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
It is. Now, those low in agreeableness, the challenge there can be building relationships, keeping those relationships strong.
Okay.
Their directness, their assertiveness, it can come across as abrasive.
So while they might be good at, getting things done, they might struggle with that trust, that intimacy.
Exactly. And that can lead to loneliness, isolation, difficulty working with others.
Right. So finding that balance, like you said, is key.
It is. It's about standing up for yourself, but also being mindful of the impact you have on others.
All right, let's wrap up our Big Five exploration with neuroticism.
Okay.
This one, as we said, often misunderstood. People think it's just about being anxious or emotional.
Right.
But it's really about how you react to stress, how sensitive you are to those negative emotions. And believe it or not, it's not a bad thing to be high in neuroticism.
Yeah, it gets a bad rap. But it can actually be a real asset in certain contexts.
Really? I always thought of it as a negative trait. How could it be an asset?
People high in neuroticism are often very self-aware, very in tune with their own emotions, and they tend to be very empathetic.
So more sensitive maybe to criticism or rejection, but also more likely to pick up on the subtle cues. Understand what others are feeling.
Exactly. Think about fields like counseling, social work, creative arts. They bring a lot to the table.
That makes sense.
So more prone to anxiety or, maybe even depression, but they have a depth of feeling and understanding that can make them incredibly insightful, incredibly compassionate.
Okay, so again, a spectrum.
Always a spectrum.
Someone low in neuroticism isn't like a robot.
Right.
They just might be more emotionally stable, more resilient to stress.
Right. Which is, valuable in those high-pressure situations.
Yeah, totally. So it's not about being emotionless. It's just
Right.
like a different baseline, a different way of processing stress.
Exactly. Every personality has its strengths, has its weaknesses. There's no one right way to be.
Now let's talk about how neuroticism interacts with, let's say, conscientiousness.
Okay.
What does that look like?
Someone high in both, high in neuroticism and high in conscientiousness, they might be a high achiever. But they're also prone to anxiety, to perfectionism.
So very successful, but constantly stressed.
Yeah. worried about making mistakes.
That sounds tough.
It can be. And that can lead to burnout if they don't manage that stress.
Right.
Now, if they're low in neuroticism and high in conscientiousness, that's a different story.
How so?
They might be very calm, very collected, very efficient.
So they can handle the pressure?
They can, and maintain that positive outlook even when things get tough.
So really, understanding your big five traits helps you understand your reactions.
It does.
Why you might react a certain way in a certain situation, how you can use your strengths, how you can manage the weaknesses.
It's all about self-awareness, and then using that knowledge to create a life that's both fulfilling and authentic.
Okay, before we wrap up this part, let's talk about some of the misconceptions surrounding Big Five.
Okay, good idea.
Like one of the big ones is that it, puts people in boxes.
Right, like a label. But it's important to remember that Big Five is a framework for understanding. It's not about these rigid categories.
Right, so it's not about saying that, everyone who's high in openness is exactly the same.
Not at all. There's variation within each trait. And, how those traits actually show up in your life is influenced by so many things. Your genetics, your upbringing, your culture, your experiences.
So it's more about those general tendencies associated with each trait, and then using that knowledge to better understand, yourself and the people around you.
Exactly.
Another misconception is that these scores, these Big Five scores, are set in stone.
Right, like you can't change.
Yeah, people think, oh, I'm introverted, guess I'm stuck that way.
But research has actually shown that personality can change over time,
Oh, that's good to know.
especially through conscious effort, personal growth.
So if you're not happy with where you fall on, like a certain trait, you can actually work on it.
You can. There are tools and resources to help you do that.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's got to be ways to, develop these different aspects of yourself.
But yeah, there are therapies, like cognitive behavioral therapy, for example. It can be really effective for managing anxiety, improving self-esteem,
Okay.
helping people develop healthier coping mechanisms.
And then there are, the self-help books, the workshops, the online courses. All those things can be really helpful, too.
They can. It's just remembering that you're not stuck. You have the power to shape your own path.
All right. Now, before we wrap up this section completely, want to mention a great resource for anyone who's interested in exploring their personality further.
Oh, yes, that first.
And that is Personality NFT.
Yep.
They offer, a bunch of tools and resources, personality tests, AI-powered analysis, and even, a whole community of people who are passionate about personal growth.
It's a great place to connect with like-minded people, learn more about how to use your personality strengths, create that life that really aligns with who you are.
It sounds like a fantastic resource. So that's it for our deep dive into openness.
Okay.
We've covered a lot of ground and, everything from the definition to how it interacts with other traits.
Right.
So as we move on to the next part of this deep dive, think about where you fall on this openness spectrum.
Yeah.
How might that be influencing your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors?
Good question to ponder. It's funny how much our personalities shape how we see the world. Take neuroticism. We think of it as a bad thing, but research suggests there's a link between neuroticism and, believe it or not, creativity.
Wait, really? So you're saying that people who are, more sensitive, more intense,
Yeah.
they might actually be more creative?
Yeah, think about it. People high in neuroticism tend to be more sensitive to their surroundings. They notice things others might miss.
Right, they pick up on those subtleties.
Exactly, and they experience a wider range of emotions, which can, in a way, fuel their imagination.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. So it's not about being, happy-go-lucky all the time. It's about harnessing that intensity.
It's like that saying, pain can be a great teacher. Those who feel those lows more intensely might also have a greater capacity for empathy.
Oh, that's interesting. And that can be really powerful in creative fields.
Absolutely. Like writing, music, art. So it's not about eliminating neuroticism, it's about learning to manage it.
And using it as inspiration, even.
Exactly. There are healthy ways to do that. Mindfulness, therapy, or even just finding those creative outlets.
This reminds me of something we talked about earlier about how the different Big Five traits interact.
Yeah.
You said high conscientiousness can actually help with the downsides of high neuroticism.
Oh, absolutely. Someone who is highly conscientious, their organizational skills, their planning, their discipline, those things can help them stay on track even when they're feeling anxious.
So they still feel it, but they have tools to manage it.
Like a strong foundation that can handle an earthquake.
I like that analogy. It's about understanding those strengths so you can handle the challenges.
Exactly. Someone high in neuroticism, but low in conscientiousness, They might need to work a bit harder on those organizational skills.
To create those routines that help them manage the anxiety.
Exactly. It's not about changing who you are. It's about finding what works for you. It's like a personalized toolkit.
Okay, I want to go back to agreeableness for a second. We talked about boundaries, especially for those who are highly agreeable. Any tips on how to approach that?
Setting boundaries can be tough, especially for people pleasers. It's like they're wired to say yes.
Right, they don't want to disappoint anyone.
But setting boundaries is self-care. It's about protecting your time and energy.
So how do you break that people-pleasing pattern?
Start small. Instead of overhauling everything, say no to something small.
So instead of baking 3 dozen cookies for the bake sale, maybe just donate some money.
Exactly. Or if a friend asks for help moving, maybe just offer to help pack.
So you're still helping, but not overextending yourself.
Exactly. And as you get more comfortable saying no to small things, we can work your way up.
I've heard it helps to, practice saying no in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds silly, but...
It works. It's about getting comfortable with the word. It's not a confrontation. It's just communicating your limits.
Now, I want to address another misconception about Big Five. People think it's only useful for personal growth.
Right. It's just self-help.
But it has so many other applications.
It does. Career counseling, relationship therapy, even organizational psychology.
Really? How so?
Well, with careers, understanding someone's Big Five profile can help them find jobs that fit their strengths.
So, someone high in openness but low in conscientiousness probably wouldn't love being an accountant.
Right. They'd be better in a creative field. And in relationship therapy, it can help couples understand each other's communication styles.
So if one person's super extroverted and the other's introverted, they need to find that balance.
Exactly. And in organizations, it can help build effective teams. So yeah, it's a very versatile framework.
Okay, let's wrap up the Big Five with openness to experience. We already talked about it, but let's dive deeper.
Sounds good.
So high in openness, we're talking adventurous, imaginative, always trying new things.
The travelers, the foodies, the art lovers.
Always up for a challenge.
And that leads to more diverse life experiences. But it's not just external, it's internal too. That thirst for knowledge, that willingness to question your beliefs.
They're the ones asking why. All the time.
Exactly. Always trying to learn more. They love to debate, read widely, have those deep conversations.
And it leads to being more open-minded, more tolerant.
Yeah, they have strong opinions, but they're willing to listen, which makes them great collaborators.
What about those low in openness? Does that mean they're boring?
Not at all. They might just find comfort in routine and familiarity.
They like what they know.
And that doesn't mean they can't grow. They just approach it differently.
So they might not be the trendsetters, but they're the ones who provide stability.
Exactly. They appreciate tradition, history, heritage.
Okay, so what are the potential downsides here for both high and low openness?
Well, for high openness, the challenge can be commitment. They might get bored easily, always chasing the next thing.
So they need to learn to focus that energy.
Exactly. And for low openness, the challenge can be resisting change, clinging to routines even when they're not working.
So finding that balance between comfort and growth is key.
It is. Staying true to yourself, but also being open to new possibilities.
Now, what about risk-taking behavior? Are people high in openness more risky?
That's a myth. They're more likely to try new things, but that doesn't mean dangerous things.
So they might travel to a new country, but they're not necessarily going to go skydiving.
Exactly. Some studies even show they're more likely to have healthy habits.
So it's about that broader range of interests, not about seeking thrills.
Right. Risk-taking is complex. It's not just about personality.
It's individual. It's about perspective.
Exactly. Avoid those stereotypes about people based on personality.
I think we've covered openness pretty thoroughly.
I think so, yeah.
We've seen all its different sides.
And talked about that balance between staying true to yourself and being open to change.
Exactly. And remember, if you want to learn more about your own personality, there are resources like Personality NFT. They offer tools, insights to help you on your journey.
It's a great place to start.
Okay, so we've covered all 5 traits: openness, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism.
We really delved into them.
But before we finish this deep dive, let's talk about ethics, using personality assessments responsibly.
Very important. They can be insightful, but we can't use them to label people.
It's not about putting people in boxes.
It's a starting point for understanding, for empathy, for appreciating diversity.
And we shouldn't use them for hiring or promoting.
No, those decisions should be based on skills and experience.
So personality assessments, yes, but thoughtfully and ethically.
Exactly. It's about empowering people, not limiting them.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a question. Knowing your Big Five profile, how can you use that to make positive changes?
That's a great question. It's about knowing your strengths, your challenges, and making choices that align with your values.
It's about using your personality as a guide for growth.
And remember, there are resources to support you, like Personality NFT. They offer tools, tests, a community.
So take this knowledge, explore yourself, and see where it leads. This has been The Deep Dive. Thanks for listening.